The Golden Stallion is here for you, baby. And I'm actually, so it's time for your little Wednesday Sovereign Tech Q&A. And I'm actually doing this as a bonus on video. Not that anybody's joining in or anything, but just there'll be a link in the show notes for this episode where you can watch, as a patron, you get to watch the video of this. Also, last night, and Patreon's been a little funky. Maybe it's because they're adding in all these new features that it's killing some of their other code. I don't know. But last night, the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy and I, we actually recorded a relationship Q&A, which we fielded. A lot of the questions were ones that have been sent in to me over time to Patreon, by patrons. The others were from the Sovereign Tech Facebook group, which most of the people that asked were patrons anyway. We got through a lot of them, almost all of them. I mean, it was a lot of fun to do. I enjoy, it's a, as far as how anybody, relationships like the rest of the human condition are so varied. And I mean, like it's so hard to really have a necessarily like right answer. I mean, I think there are some not absolutes. I think there are some objective realities around it all, but different strokes, different folks, or different. Is that how that goes? Yeah. Anyway, that was a lot of fun. So make sure you look for that in your feed if you haven't already. I think I called it the Relationship Rhombus Show, and that's because Stephanie's, cute and I'm very obtuse, equally. So anyway, I love the word rhombus. It's such a funny shape. I mean, it's not a funny shape. It's a shape that makes total sense. But all right, let's get into this week's Q&A because I got a lot to cover here, and actually just taking a quick look at the time, because when I don't have the timer in front of me on Audacity, because I'm not recording this in Audacity, I'll actually just rip the audio right from YouTube, or right from the Hangout. I don't know how long I'm going, but I like to keep track of that sort of thing. So something else to announce, that when this gets released, there will be a previous post as well on Patreon, and that previous post will be the Patreon RetroShare directory, and this will always be available. And what I mean by that is it'll be a post that'll actually have its own URL. It'll be retroshare.sovereigntech.com. Only patrons will be able to see it, but it allows you to connect with everybody, and it has the primary address run by Aaron E. for getting access to all of the patron kind of, there's all kinds of fun stuff on there. Star Wars, there's just all kinds of wild shit that you can get access to through RetroShare, and I'm really enjoying how everybody's getting on board, and we're kind of fostering this RetroShare community. But anyway, so the page where my RetroShare key is, Aaron E's RetroShare key, everybody's RetroShare key is. And if you really don't want yours shared, message me, let me know, and I'll get rid of it on that page. But there's also a video there where that explains how to use RetroShare and how to connect and how to get everything set up. But yeah, retroshare.sovereigntech.com. That's the URL for that. If you want to become a part of really, I think, what is a phenomenal software. And everybody that's been jumping on it recently has messaged me with the same thing, saying, wow, this is great. Like, how did we not know about this before? Well, I mean, you knew about it. For a while, I talked about it years ago, but I stopped talking about it because nobody was using it. But now it's so cool that people are jumping on. I love you for it. So anyway, RetroShare, that's out there. And again, retroshare.sovereigntech.com. To find all that, which is great, because I'd actually been sharing the RetroShare key for the content that is being made available, and the content that's available is stuff that I like, that I'll talk about, and that way maybe you don't have to mess with the torrents or other things to be able to check out what I'm talking about most of the time. So this is I'm not even operating this. This is being totally run by Sovereign Tech fans. And I am just so honored by that. That's so cool that people are starting to really pick up the torch on using these technologies like RetroShare. But it's great because I always had to put the key for the content into the show notes of the Q&A episodes. And now I can just give you the link, and there you can find everything you need. And it makes a very nice directory for patrons. And again, you do need to be a patron to find it, even though you can just type in that URL. If you're not a patron, it's going to go to, you need to sign up for Patreon. So, hey, rock and roll. Anyway, so that's very exciting. Of course, the Sovereign Tech Facebook group is still going through the roof as far as, well over 100 members, which I think is really great. That, a lot of fun's being had there. I get to share, honestly, a lot of like sexy art. And I'll tell you, it's part of the reason I wanted to create the secret group, because, well, anyway, there's a conversation we had around this, and I think I'll save it for a Sovereign Tech Prime episode, because again, it's not a patron only perk. So, I want to talk about it with everybody. But anyway, it's been a lot of fun, a lot of people, doing their fun threads, and, and also I'm very pleased. Like, it's almost 50-50, as far as men, women, whatever. And I think that's fantastic too, which I don't, it's certainly with posting it, I think it's very much 50-50, which I don't think most other podcasts can really claim, in my opinion. I'm not looking to boast here. I'm just saying I'm in some groups for other podcasts, that some of the podcasts which I enjoy, and I mean, it's a fucking sausage fest. So anyway, that's out there, and if you want to jump on board with that, as usual, like I've said, you have to friend me first on Facebook, and then just PM me saying you want to join the group. But you got to PM me and let me know you want to join the group, and then I'll get you in on it. So okay, enough of that. Let's start getting into the questions here. And I'll open it up with a tech question. Then honestly, we got a lot of like more maybe philosophical or entrepreneurial questions. I'm just going to have a sip of some fine seltzer here. Can't hum while I'm swallowing. Anyway. So, and I should be looking at the camera more. Obviously, I can't look at it while I'm reading. But let's see. So, Brian, my wife accidentally deleted some video from her Canon EOS Rebels SD card. Ooh, nice camera. Luckily, she didn't add anything to the card after realizing what she had done. I have tried some recovery softwares, and while they retrieve the seemingly correct files, the videos in MOV format seem to be corrupted to an extent because the video is black and the audio plays but experiences hissing distortion. I can keep trying different softwares, but the results seem fairly consistent. Do you know of any service that might be able to help? She's really wanting these videos back. Okay. So other than like my go-to for a lot of different feature sets in this area is what do they call Asus? It's not like Asus, it's Ease US or Ease Us. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but I've been using it for seemingly decades. I mean, I know it's been around at least a decade, but I forget how long actually it's been around. But I mean, I've been using it forever. And they have the Ease US Data Recovery Wizard Pro, and that's at easeus.com. That you can find that. They have it for Mac, they have it for Windows, and it can even some of it can work independently. Other than recommending that, and I'll put a link in the show notes for it, there's a real danger, okay, with this is kind of the nature of flash storage in general, flash memory, be it an SD card, be it a solid state drive that's in your computer. The problem is that, like, because there's limited read writes on flash storage, flash storage usually will go through now with NVMe drives. This is kind of changing, and to some degree with NAND, this is with NAND technology, this is kind of changing, but it goes through a destructive process that a normal hard drive, that a normal storage device wouldn't do. And because of that, and that's all to like increase the longevity of the drive. It's not a bug. It's actually kind of a feature. And actually, after a fashion, I think it's a really good feature, because when your data's, when your data is destroyed, it's destroyed. Because with good old fashioned platinum hard drives, I know we're just talking about an SD card here, but I just want to explain this. With a good old fashioned, glass platter, hard drive, like people had been using for decades, before solid state drives became such a big deal, you really had to. In fact, there was a specific software that you would use. Like there was Drop Erase, I think was one of them, and you could use it like with portable apps and everything. But there was Drop Erase, and there's varying other pieces of software with that kind of name. where you would, what you wanted to delete, instead of sending it, say, on a Windows computer, instead of sending it to the recycle bin, you would drop it into drop erase. Like you'd have the little icon on your desktop, and then it would rewrite it like 50 times, or it would delete it over and over again 50 times, because that was to ensure that somebody couldn't actually recover the data. Now, ironically, that's sort of like a nature of the beast that happening. That's a nature of the beast of flash memory. So I want to say, I think you're really, unfortunately, you're out of luck. If EaseUS, if their data recovery pro software doesn't work for you, and you already said that you're using, which, I mean, you know what you're doing as far as that. I mean, you've already started using some data recovery software and you weren't having a lot of luck. You do have to pay for EaseUS's. I think they might have like a free USB recovery, which your SD card would kind of fit under that, a USB recovery kind of tool that you can download there. But yeah, you might be out of luck, because it's the nature of flash memory. And I mean, and certainly most SD cards are not using like, NAND, to be able to, where maybe that would be more of a feature. I mean, a lot of the new developments in solid state drives and in flash memory are really just to get it to mimic, more or less the capabilities, the restorative capabilities and longevity capabilities of the glass platter hard drives, And I'm not saying that glass platinum hard drives are more, are somehow superior exactly, but yeah, I mean, there's times where, this kind of stuff happens, or like when a flash drive, when a solid state drive dies, or, it's starting to randomly like delete data without you even, meaning to delete something. I mean, those problems really still exist. And there's a reason that, old fashioned, glass platter drives are still, good old fashioned hard drives are still sold, disk drives. Anyway, so yeah, I wish I had a better answer for that, but that's what I've got. so give that a shot. If that works, great. And actually do let me know if it does end up working out for you. I'd like to know, what happens with that. But you might be, like I said, you might be completely out of luck, and it's just the nature of the technology. Okay, so let's get into I've got a bit of an entrepreneurial question, which was, it'll say when I read the question that it was inspired by the Sovereign Tech Uncensored Facebook group. Hey, Brian, I was inspired by Jay Curious. Now I'm recording this. Let's see. I was inspired by the question in the Facebook group about life crossroads to finally, we had a little error there quick. So anyway, I'll probably clip that out in the audio, about life crossroads to finally write this question up. Meaning the subject of crossroads in life. Been meaning to do it for weeks now. When did you decide to become an entrepreneur? What were you doing at the time? Was it a big switch or something you did gradually? And how's it going for you? If you don't mind, I'd be curious to know how your games/music/book are selling. How Sovereign Tech Solutions is going, and are there jobs/money making ventures you do? Also, how do you manage all those projects you're working on? I will get to all these questions. Do you have any tools you use to keep track of everything? I ask all this because a few years ago now, I quit the rat race and have been working part-time on a business my friend and I started. It hasn't really done much, just making a little spending cash, but now the company he works for is going out of business, and rather than finding another job, we want to put everything into growing our business and see what happens. It's kind of scary. We could be broke and looking for jobs in a few months. Any advice for aspiring entrepreneurs would be helpful. Ooh, okay. So there's like a bunch of questions in one here, and I still have other things to get to. But yeah, I really, these are great questions and I want to address them. So let's start it off. When did you decide to become an entrepreneur, and what were you doing at the time? Okay, so I decided to become an entrepreneur totally inspired by the lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy. This would be October 2011. I had just moved to New Hampshire, and because before I moved to New Hampshire, I was in New York, and I was working for a fairly, it's kind of not a boutique, not a boutique tech company. I was working for a company that makes point of sale systems, and they have a major contract with McDonald's. So like they're kind of a big company, but they're also kind of not. So that's what I was doing at the time. And I mean, this, becoming, I guess, an entrepreneur on my own, and I didn't really think of it that way, but becoming an entrepreneur on my own was a total outcropping of, I went through divorce. Like, I mean, I did a complete life upending. My life completely changed in October of 2011 when I moved to New Hampshire. So I was, I did get on kind of a regular job when I got here. And then eventually, I started doing Sovereign Tech in 2012. And then I was, eventually got to the point where, well, let's see where we can just take Sovereign Tech. Let's just ride with that. And that it's a scary jump for a few different reasons, but it's a little more complex than that. And I'll talk about it here. Was it a big switch or something you did gradually? Big switch, big switch, and really it came down to like, I needed to find ways to make a lot more money than I was making, with the job that I had in New Hampshire. And so, that was the decision process. There we go. It wasn't necessarily because, I mean, I could do, the Sovereign Tech podcast. I mean, it was at the time, particularly, this is years ago, it was once a week. I mean, I could easily do that while working 9 to 5, I mean, that's not, that wasn't really, a problem at the time, but, taking it to the next level, as I've been trying to do the past 2-3 years, that requires a lot more work on my part, a lot more work. And in fact, I might talk about that towards the end of this episode, not during this entrepreneurial thing. Maybe I'll get into it a little bit with this entrepreneurial question. How's it going for you? It's okay. So well, I need to describe all my different ventures, but so yeah, let me do that. Okay. So I do a bunch of different things that are all related to Sovereign Tech. Like my podcast audience, which I'm regularly getting above the 5 digits as far as, unique listen or download numbers per week, which is great. That has only been really in the past year or two in Sovereign Tech's almost 5-year history, going on 6 years. And I mean, really, like for the first couple of years, I wasn't even cracking 1,000 listeners. It just wasn't, I had above the average in podcasting. The average, above average in podcasting as far as listener numbers is over 100. Okay. Also, the average podcast only goes for about 7 episodes and then they pod fade. I could get into a huge conversation around that, but I won't. So, yeah. Now granted, and I say this all the time with the Sovereign Tech podcast, which understand the podcast is here's an irony. So, okay, there's a lot of people who make a podcast as a springboard to end up doing other things, whatever that may be. Like maybe you start a podcast to advertise your book or something like this, or some other kind of business thing. Like you're doing a podcast to, I don't know, get people on your, I don't know, like to buy you as a consultant or, to use you as a consultant and pay for your consultancy services or something like this. Right. A lot of people do that sort of thing. I certainly did not start Sovereign Tech with that in mind. I've said this all the time and it's still true. I do Sovereign Tech because my opinions are not out in the world. I do not hear them anywhere else. And so I take matters into my own hands and I do a podcast. And people tell me that that's exactly why they listen, is because they don't hear this shit anywhere else. Okay, good. So mission accomplished, right? As far as that goes. Now, because that, and it was kind of a dream come true to sort of become like, a radio personality. And granted, Sovereign Tech itself did have a jump start with the fact that I was a co-host on Free Talk Live for 2 years. That did help, but let's be clear here. It was a huge help and I respect it. And I'm honored to have had the opportunity to be a part of that show. It's not like, so, Free Talk Live gets hundreds of thousands, if not millions of listeners per month. Okay. Or listens per month. Obviously if I'm just now years later, finally breaking into the 5 digits, over 10,000 listeners or whatever, obviously like that didn't translate, right? like not everybody that listens to Free Talk Live suddenly went over to Sovereign Tech. That just didn't fucking happen. Okay. I mean, I wish it did, but it didn't happen for whatever reason. And I mean, and like it never happened. I mean, that's the thing. Like you could say, well, but maybe you had that one episode where everybody checked you out and maybe they just didn't like your podcast. No, there is by the metrics that I have, and SoundCloud has okay metrics. There is absolutely not. Was there never a point where all of the people that listen to Free Talk Live ever, or even like half of the people that listen to Free Talk Live listened to Sovereign Tech? That just never fucking happened. Okay. There is something to be said for like that the key to growing anything you're doing is just having exposure. Yep. I agree with that. But, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, I mean, and I was on that show for 2 years and I don't, that's not what grew Sovereign Tech's audience. It was other things. But all the same, it was an absolute dream come true, to kind of be on the radio. And I could go into a lot of history about that, but I'll save that maybe for another time because, well, I had a best friend who his parents actually ran a radio station. And anyway, that's a story for another time. So once that was kind of taken off, and once I started seeing that there was really an audience and donations were coming in and all that was being very nice, I was like, you know what, let's take on another dream here. And let's finally, what I've wanted to do since I was a kid. I want to make video games. And so I started Zomia Offline Games, my own game dev house. And I've made 2 games so far. They sell regularly. They do not sell in huge numbers by any stretch of the imagination, but they do sell, regularly. Like I had copies sell yesterday. That kind of seems to be the way that a lot of this goes is, almost a trickle effect, a bit will sell kind of every day, on all that, be it Hypercronius or Ninja Trek or whatever. So after that, after doing that, it's like, okay, well, let's try, another thing. And I started Audio of the Ancients, which hopefully the next entry of Audio of the Ancients will come out. Audio of the Ancients is this, I write my own music. And I do dramatic performances of ancient texts. Like I have right now I have like the Dream Stela of Tutmos IV. I do the Descent of Ishtar. And it's a lot of fun to do. And I want to, put more of that in. Those have not sold entirely well. Not that I'm so much surprised that they don't. Only because, and I don't have like exact numbers really to show you on that. But first off, like the platform I use to distribute them is Bandcamp, and Bandcamp will pretty much let people just listen for free. And so people can, they can stream it for, so many times on the website itself, which you can go to audiotheancients.xyz to get there. And so people don't have to buy it. And so they don't. And you know what? That's like, I don't really have a problem with that. And the reason I say that is because, and there's an overarching point I'm going to get to here, but the reason I don't really have a problem with that is like, look, I don't buy every album that I listen to. I just don't, I mean, there's big ones that I, like if Kiss comes out with something new, I buy it, I mean, there's a lot of people that I absolutely will financially support. There's others that I necessarily don't. So I get it. Like it's okay that people don't buy it. I do like to make it available to buy as a, kind of a show of appreciation or whatever, but people can stream it and that's how it works. And I don't believe in DRM. So, I'm not going to go after anybody, or I'm not mad about it. I I'd be a hypocrite if I did, quite frankly. So I do Audio of the Ancients. And then, I've toyed, I've had some people say, it's like, would you ever like make an actual album? I don't know. You like a more traditional music album? I like what I'm doing with Audio of the Ancients. So I'm going to stick with that. Then of course, now I also have my book, Dark Android 2017 edition at darkandroid.info. That is, I forget when I looked how many copies have sold so far. It only sells for $2.99. But I know, I mean, there's certainly at least been well over 100 copies sold. There haven't been a whole ton of copies that have sold yet, but it's a slow start. People got to, when you're advertising something, when you're putting something out there, and I think I've mentioned this before, and I know this from my history in the advertising business, you really have to like keep hammering people for like 3 months. about something. I mean, you just got to keep hammering, and until they really get it in their head. Then they're like, oh, you know what? I should buy that or something like this. Not that I'm pulling any kind of trick on anybody, but I just understand that these things can take a little bit of time. So now now I also have the Sovereign Tech newsletter, which people are just loving, and I might talk about that more a little bit later. Now, so I have all of these different things. So here's the thing with all of this. First off, I'm doing something very unique, and some people are starting to recognize it. Some people are starting to see it. Okay, I'm doing something very unique with all of my businesses, and I'm going to get into giving you, the advice and everything that you're looking for in this question. All of those properties that I just described are all connected to each other. They're all interrelated, or they are, if anything, even test platforms to what, to other things that will eventually come out. And to give you an idea of a test platform, okay, the Dark Android book, I've never published a book before. I don't know what that process looked like. So I wrote a book that I knew I could write, and that I knew that I could really be somewhat of an authority on and feel very comfortable with what I'm putting out there. And I do feel very comfortable with what I put out with Dark Android. But that's because eventually, sooner or later here, other books are going to be coming out by me that, may be much larger, or it could be the fiction books from the Sovereign Universe and whatever else. And so it's me figuring out how that process goes. Fortunately, it's very easy, and it went swimmingly. Like it was a beautiful process, quite frankly. And I've had great people help me out with it, that just great friends who at the time, were very patient with me and really helped out and gave me, a lot of great advice on how to go with all of that. So, but everything else, like Audio of the Ancients, I do Audio of the Ancients because sometimes in Sovereign Tech, I talk about ancient texts and what perhaps that may mean to the present day or to the future or something like this. Like these things come up. And so I make it available through me. So I am your one-stop shop on everything I'm fucking talking about, on everything that I'm trying to express to you, on my opinions. I am trying to lay the foundation for why I think the way I think, why I do what I do, why I take the actions that I take and everything. I am like, all of this stuff is part of a sovereign universe, not just the fictional stuff, but it all helps with that. Like when sovereign universe fictional novels come out, okay, and they will, when they come out, because I like to think I deliver on what I talk about. When they come out, there's going to be talk about shit that might be in the Descent of Ishtar. Well, wouldn't it be great if in my novel, I can just link you to where you can hear me read in an exciting way with music and sound effects and all this, the Descent of Ishtar. Wouldn't that be awesome? Fuck yeah, it'd be awesome. So I did that, but I mean, these are really long-term plays. All of these things are long-term plays. How about this? I don't think anybody saw this coming. In fact, I know some people said they didn't see it coming. They couldn't believe it. At the end, if you just listen to episode 234 of Sovereign Tech, okay, I might talk about those intros later, what's going on with that. But anyway, if you listen to that, at the end of the episode, what's the starship that gets found? The starship's the Hypercronius. But wait a minute, wait, isn't that the starship that's in your game, Hypercronius, that the whole game takes place on? Yeah. and didn't that game take place like 90,000 years ago? Yeah, exactly. See, it's all interconnected. Like it leads, everything leads to the other. Everything kind of points at the other, and it's all one gigantic universe. But it took years to put this universe together. And it's only now are people starting to see, holy shit, this is all one thing. I got to consume it all. And like now in the Sovereign Tech newsletter, at the end of each newsletter, right, I have fiction, short fiction that explains a lot of these little points that have been brought up that maybe in audio form or it would take too long to make a video game about or something like that, where it explains what's going on. But now you want to jump on my newsletter, right? And I'm not doing the newsletter I'm not doing it to sell you shit. It's just more, again, it's all about building this gigantic, this gigantic little creative universe of mine. Not necessarily fictional, creative. Okay, I don't want to use, because some of this stuff is not fiction at all. In fact, all right, so here's something. So in the latest issue of the Sovereign Tech newsletter, it talks about like in the first sentence, it says the pyramid was covered like it's on Mars. This pyramid on Mars was covered like the two sphinxes, or like one of the two sphinxes in Egypt. I really think that in fact, it's right in the ancient texts. There were two sphinxes at one point. And where's the fucking other sphinx? Well, it's probably under the sand. So, I mean, you see, like all these little hints, all this little stuff that can kind of, like will stick unconsciously with you, and then will come up on the podcast, or will be in a book, or will be in the newsletter, or will be relatable through something of Audio of the Ancients, or will end up in a video game. I mean, like these are, all this stuff becomes very interconnected. And in my opinion, when you're trying to do creative pursuits, okay, today, and this is how I'll start breaking this down. Then I need to talk about sovereign tech solutions. That's something that's kind of unique. But when you're creating, when you're trying to make a living entrepreneurially with art, with fiction, with the creative process and all that, I really think, and I've known this since I was a kid, I've known this since the 80s and 90s, you need to be multimedia. You need to have, if you really want to make money on something, like you've got to give people something from every avenue, because that's how you try and get everybody on board, is reach them through the avenue that they love. If it's video games, reach them through video games. If it's books, reach them through books. If it's, they're obsessed with email newsletters, and apparently people are today. That's the metrics that that's the statistics and metrics that I have. Reach them through a newsletter. If it's, if it's through music, reach them through music. If it's through podcasts, reach them through a fucking podcast. I mean, that's, and it's hard. Look, it's really hard. And you're going to go years if you're trying to do things like my way. And look, I'm not boasting for a second, because right now things are, I mean, Patreon, you guys and gals and Z's, I mean, you're making it happen. Okay. You're affording me the ability to make this attempt and to create this, what I hope to be an incredible, really a creative property that that can really spread anarchism, that can spread the notion of human freedom, unlike any other creative property ever has. Because none of the others have ever, except for maybe like Ian Banks' Culture series, maybe. But even then, I think a lot of people see it as an afterthought. I mean, how the fuck can you read the Culture series and not become an anarchist? Apparently, Mark Zuckerberg can't. Son of a bitch. But anyway, it's hard, and the internet. Here's a point that's very important, and I think this goes even beyond the creative process and all that. The internet loves quantity over quality. This is so key. This is the number one thing. If you want to learn anything about entrepreneurship from what I'm saying, take this one. Okay. The internet loves quantity over quality. The quality is important. You want to deliver an absolute quality product, but what people really care about is seeing, especially today, people care about seeing a lot from you. They want to see quantity from you. And I think, in my opinion, now, I've never read anybody say this sort of thing. I've read people say that they love, that's kind of somewhat an open secret about the quantity over quality thing with the internet as far as doing business. But the reason why I don't think I've never really read this opinion come out, but it's my opinion on why I think this is because I think people today, with so much bullshit out there, with really almost choice overload, overload of, like, what do they call that? Decision fatigue or something. People look for, one of the easiest signals to look for is some kind of antiquity or some kind of historicity. And I think quantity gives people a either faux or very real, and in my sense, I hope it's very real. I've been doing this for years now. Sense of, oh, this has been around. This is real. This is legit. I want to check this out. I need to be on board with this. Like, I think it's a shortcut of getting people to, to find what you're putting out there as something that they want to give their attention to, in this attention economy, right? That's a buzzword out there. So that's why I think quantity over quality, or why the internet likes quantity so much over quality. I really think that's kind of the, the reasons behind that. So yeah. And also, I think you have to have all of these different avenues. I don't think just having, video is kind of unique. If you do video and you have like a really solid YouTube channel, video can kind of show is almost multimedia in and of itself. So I think that can, a person can just like rely on doing YouTube videos and maybe do well for themselves, but then you're always beholden to YouTube. And I think that's just way too risky, way too dangerous a fucking game, in my opinion. So anyway, yeah, like all of these things, like I need to do all of these things for it to even be worthwhile. Like I have to do all of these different avenues. I have to make games, books, music, albums, podcasts, and newsletters, and all that, for all of this to be worth it. I can't just rely on one. Like, it's not even just rely on the podcast. It's just not possible. All of these different elements have to be there to really make, try making money. And I'm not even like making like a great, quote unquote living wage or something like that off of doing this, at least not yet. But I think, if you can get through this, if you can keep pushing forward, eventually years down the line, once you have a bit of that amount of quantity, and if you have quality as well, awesome. And you have that kind of that history behind you, where, Sovereign Tech's got 5-6 years. I mean, that's great. That blows away most podcasts, quite frankly. I mean, really, like out of the thousands or hundreds of thousands or however many fucking podcasts there are, I'm probably, podcasts that have been around for 5-6 years, something like that, are probably in the 1%. But I mean, it takes that time, and that's really the thing. I don't know a lot of entrepreneurial efforts that aren't interested in scamming people that really like are overnight successes. It takes years, it takes time, and that's a very scary prospect. So let me answer the next part of this question. So let's see, how is Sovereign Tech Solutions going, and are there other jobs, money-making ventures you do? So Sovereign Tech Solutions has taken on, what it is I created, like, okay, I'll do cybersecurity consulting effectively. I have a few clients, and it has taken on shapes that I didn't really expect. In fact, I do audio editing I do it for Stephanie. I do it for other podcasts. I do a lot of audio work for other podcasts and everything, which that's a side job that I never expected, and that I kind of put under the Sovereign Tech Solutions banner, where, because of my history, and some would argue, and Stephanie would say this, my mastery with podcasting, that could translate into me doing work for other podcasts that brings them to the next level. And I'm really honored to be able to do that. I work with just amazing women on that. In fact, here's an irony for you. 100% of my clients are women, and often within the liberty movement. And I think that's so funny, because a lot of the liberty movement today is so like, oh, women don't know business. They don't have the lobes for business, right? Kind of like the Ferengi and, and all this shit. Well, the only people that are fucking paying out, that are actually paying people for the work, and not just like bringing on interns and freeloaders or whatever, or freeloading, not that they're bringing on freeloaders, but freeloading, people and all that stuff, are women. How about that? I know that for a fact. That's not fucking anecdotal. That's a fact. Everybody else is working off interns and a whole bunch of other bullshit. It's insulting. Like some of the biggest names in libertarianism and anarcho-capitalism, are absolute freeloaders as far as work goes. But the women involved, oh no, they're paying. And I think it might even be partly because they're a woman. They're like, no, I know what it's like to not get respect, so I'm going to give you the respect, and they fucking pay. And good for them. And I'm honored by that. I'm honored that they trust me, and and I'm on board with that. So anyway, Sovereign Tech Solutions hasn't been. I mean, a lot of people can't afford what I was, what I was asking for. But it's not like I'm asking for something crazy. I was actually doing well below industry rates. But the average person just really can't afford that, unfortunately. So I that's part of the reason I did the book, is because the book is an inexpensive way to get out there a lot of what I would talk about, with cybersecurity consulting. And that's why the book is concentrated on a much broader audience as well, than just the Sovereign Tech listeners. So, anyway, so Sovereign Tech Solutions, it's taken on other shapes. But I mean, I do get jobs, through it. So again, I mean, monetarily, like, a lot of this is not really, bringing home the bacon. And I'm just being honest with you. I mean, I plan on it. Hopefully it will do so more. And certainly Patreon has been a massive, massive help. I can't tell you how much Patreon has changed things. Even though, I only have 100 patrons, it's only doing like $350 a month and all that. I mean, that is a huge help. Like, it's crazy how much the Patreons help out with all this. So anyway, I hope that answers all that. And I have a broader point I'm going to get to at the end here. Also, how do you manage all those projects you're working on? Do you have any tools you use to keep track of everything? No, I actually have almost no tools. I stick within the Microsoft ecosystem with everything that I use. Mainly because a lot of the software that I need to use runs on Windows. So I'm going to have that fucking Microsoft account. I know people, oh, you're not using open source. I use open source everywhere that I can, of course. And there's a whole other part of my existence, shall we say, where I use all that shit exclusively. Don't worry. But for everything that I'm doing with Sovereign Tech and whatever, to be able to get it done in an efficient amount of time and by my fucking self, I use Windows, and I use, like I said, I'm well within the Microsoft ecosystem, even using Outlook, using the calendar within Outlook, using Microsoft Word, OneNote, all of these different things, even though and OneDrive, even though lately I've been trying to port everything over, to my own NAS. But this is for efficiency of working with clients, like everybody uses Skype. I have to use Skype. There it is. So I'm within the Microsoft ecosystem just because that's the one account where I know I'm going to have it, right? But that's really the only reason. It's not like there aren't great alternatives to Microsoft. It's just because this way I don't have to make 20 billion accounts for other services, which I think is a huge security flaw, way worse than relying on Microsoft. And also, this way I don't have to rely on Google. I don't have to, which Google isn't. So here's the thing, right? Like, why use Microsoft? Why use Microsoft services? Why use OneDrive? Why use, Word, or Outlook and all this? Because Google has a proven track record. Shut the fuck up. Yes, it is. It is a proven track record that they will remove features and services willy-nilly. Doesn't matter how popular it is. If they don't like it, if it's against their plan, they just get rid of it. Now, as a business, can they do that? Well, of course they can. Okay. If I want to take down Hyperchronius and never let anybody play it again, I'll do that. But of course, it's DRM free, so people could just download it and share it themselves. But anyway, you get my point. Okay. But Google will just get rid of services out of nowhere. So I absolutely will not build what I am doing on Google. I just won't. I don't trust them. As for Microsoft, they have almost to an absolute literal fault, they are backwards compatible and they never kill anything. They just don't. Like, even Microsoft Edge still has a goddamn Internet Explorer compatibility mode. They just will not kill the past. And there's a certain, as an entrepreneur especially, talking about having that historicity that people look for to why they want to use something. Well, here it is. Microsoft's got the best fucking track record in the world. Not even Apple. Fuck Apple. Like, my favorite word processor in Office software historically was AppleWorks. I used AppleWorks 6 all the way up until like 2011, and it hadn't been updated for probably like 7 years at that point. It had been a long time. AppleWorks, it was great, and it just died. I could probably still use it if I really wanted to, but there's varying issues for that. But I still have my copy of it. Shit. But that's the thing is, like, really, Microsoft's the one company where shit stays as it is. Now, there can be problems with that, I grant you, okay, because it can keep them from really moving forward and doing quantum leaps and shit. But no, at the end of the day, there's a real confidence in doing that. So yeah, I use Microsoft's stuff, pretty much like their ecosystem pretty much exclusively to achieve a lot of what I have going on. And the same goes for why I'm using Windows 10 for a lot of different things, for a lot of the conversion software, movie making software, whatever else, game making software, all of that, because once again, Microsoft is usually, other than the driver issue that happened between XP and Vista, Microsoft is usually really great about making sure that, like I said, AppleWorks 6, I could still use that. And that software is over a decade old. That's fucking incredible, that you can do that. And so, yeah, I have a Windows PC. As to where there's whole swaths of software, especially when Apple switched from PowerPC to Intel, right? There's whole swaths of software that you can't use anymore. That people loved perhaps back in, even the early days of Mac OS, or what used to be, OS 10. So that's why I use that. Before anybody gives me any shit, I think you'll find my arguments pretty valid. Good luck arguing against me. You can try, and I'm open to it. You can email me about it, but there it is. So tools to keep track of everything, I really don't. I manage all these projects, like mainly in my brain. All this stuff sticks in my brain. And I wanted to do with a great friend. I wanted to do a whole episode about the creative process that we didn't get to, unfortunately. But maybe I'll get into that at some point, because that's a whole other conversation on how I do that. But really all the stuff I kind of keep in my head, and that's recently been becoming a problem. This is something I was saying that I wanted to talk about later on in the show, maybe, but maybe I'll bring it up now, is that really sovereign tech is to the point, and it's been to this point for over a year, where like, I don't want an intern. I want a paid, I don't want it like a secretary. I don't like that term. But I need to hire somebody for sovereign tech, like and not just sovereign tech, everything. Like for Zomia offline games, I need to hire somebody that really can and will keep track of all this stuff and can take on a lot of the load of even like, like my Dark Android book. I had great people work with me on it where, they could help me with spelling and some grammatical shit and everything. But like my newsletters, I know there's grammar errors in it. Like I find them after I read it, but I'm in such a rush just to get all of these different projects out that sometimes it suffers. But like I said, quantity over quality, right? I still deliver quality, I think. And in fact, especially, the people already love this newsletter. And I love doing it because I could talk more about the newsletter, later, but there's a lot of reasons that I really love doing it. It's just, it's a microcosm of everything that's going on for me kind of at once, and it's really so cool. But anyway, so yeah, I'm at the point where I need to hire somebody. And really that could help out with Sex and Science Hour as well. I don't want to call it an intern. I don't know, that just seems insulting. I guess just an assistant. I need to hire an assistant. And I'm going to be shaking some, I'll talk about this here now quick. I'll be shaking some things up on Patreon. To where like I would like some of the Patreon dollars. And if you disagree with this and you don't want your Patreon dollars going to this, please just talk to me. Just talk to me. And you can convince me. My mind can be changed. All right. It really, even on the simplest of things, my mind can absolutely be changed. But especially on the big things. So, but I would like to get to the point, we're getting close to the $500 a month range where I'll end up doing 2 episodes per week. And of course there's other reward levels and all that stuff, but I'm going to be shaking things up a bit on Patreon. Nothing that will really affect much in the way that you're getting content. If you're one of those people that only pays $1, if you're one of the people that, pay $5, $20, whatever you pay. But yeah, sovereign tech, like my Zomia offline games, sovereign tech, all that really needs an assistant. It needs somebody to jump on board, and I want to pay them. I do not want it to be a free. I've had great listeners get in touch with me saying, hey, I'd love to help out with the show and all that. And I really appreciate that, but I want to pay people. Okay. Like I want value. I'm such a big believer in value for value. And I think I deliver that, that's how I want it to be. But I really need that person. I have people in mind, that I would hire for that, great people in mind. And anyway, that's something I'll be talking about more. And I guess that keeps me from having to talk about it later, but I'm definitely at that point, to where, I really need to hire somebody on. Okay. So let's see. So yeah. So how do I keep track of things? It's really all in my head, but it's getting to the point where like, it kind of can't stay all in my head, and I need somebody, on board. So I ask all this because a few years ago now, I'll just read the rest of the question here. I quit the rat race and have been working part-time on a business my boyfriend and I started. It hasn't really done much, just making a little spending cash. But now the company he works for is going out of business. And rather than finding another job, we want to put everything into growing our business and see what happens. It's kind of scary. We could be broke and looking for jobs in a few months. Any advice you have for aspiring entrepreneurs? In my opinion, just based upon, I know, like, I work way too much. It is really fucking stressful, to keep pushing. And even like with the clients that I take on, and not that I have that many clients, but like the kind of the work that I do, it all being relative to cybersecurity and getting things done online and securing shit and whatever else. Like it is just a 24/7 affair. It is nonstop. And it's the nature of our interconnected world right now, is that, it's not like there's a time where people can just give you a phone call, you talk for 30 minutes and then you're done for the week or something like that. Like, no, now it's, Okay, oh, I got a message, got a notification, and it never stops. And people get mad if you don't respond to them, quickly enough, right? And I'm not saying that people have a problem with what I do; they don't. But I'm just saying this is a real problem today. Is everything is very now, and that is a huge issue. And I think while there's tremendous entrepreneurial advantages to that sort of thing, because it also gives you the ability to act now with your business, it can also like be really detrimental and very stressful, and you could really affect your life and your health. Even if you're making great money, you might not be able to even spend it, so yeah, I mean, the best thing that one can do, or I think the optimal way to do things, is to lay your groundwork while you have some kind of 9 to 5. And once you start to see something remotely looking like survivability money, then you could maybe make the leap. You're going to have a lot of sleepless nights, when you're just trying to lay the foundation. I still have my sleepless nights. I have way too many. I mean, like that's the reality, but it is very rewarding to do it. Real quick, another piece of advice, and this doesn't apply. I know the person who sent this question, so I know this doesn't really apply to you, but I just want to put this out there. Jake DeSillis, good friend, and just one of the few people that I have 100% respect for, in this world. And I mean, there are a handful of people that I feel that way about. Not to say there are more than the handful. It's just they're the ones I know. And I mean, not just a handful. I mean, really, I have a personal Dunbar number of maybe 10 to 15 people that 100% I am on board with them. And anyway, so not that we 100% agree on things, but just that they have my respect, and I know they're a genuinely great person, and an ethical blah blah blah. So Jake, he has his podcast, The Voluntary Life, and he's said on his podcast, and he's a great resource to reach out to, maybe become his patron as well, because he does. In fact, I'm a patron of his, and he did a hangout on Discord, on the Discord app, just the other day, just this past Sunday, where he fielded questions, and his answers were phenomenal. I mean, it was really, really cool. I mean, I didn't ask any questions on it, but I mean, the people that it was really cool. Anyway, he has said in the past, he said, look, the best time to be an entrepreneur, he has books too. He has Job Free. He has a couple other books that are great. If you become a patron, I think you get them for free. But he said, he's known for saying, if you can, when you're like a teenager or very young and you're still living with your parents, that's when you do your entrepreneurial pursuits, because you have that safety net, of your parents. Right. He said, that's really the time, that's the best time to do this sort of thing. And so, a 9-to-5 job is very much kind of that, I think, also sort of that safety net that you can work with. Or if you have some kind of nest egg and you can save up money, do that. Like they described, kind of the boyfriend here, their work, that the job that he's with is going out of business. So he's kind of screwed. Yeah. I don't want to say take the leap and just you'll make it, this is your time, this is your moment, or something like that. It's scary, and it can, I mean, just be prepared to not live your life for a while doing this. And maybe that's not worth it. And maybe it will fail and you'll have to get, jobs that you don't like. I think there's sort of a fetishization with being an entrepreneur today. I don't agree with that fetish. I think that it is completely fucking valid to work, to have the safety net of working with a company, a big company or whatever, and, and doing what you do kind of outside of that. I mean, that's my opinion on it. So, please just don't buy into the hype that, yeah, we can do this. Maybe you can't. All right. I mean, I'm barely getting there, and it took years. And that's the thing. That's the biggest thing to consider, is that it can take years for what you're putting down for your entrepreneurial pursuit to finally pay off, and pay off at all. You could be making no money for years on what you try, and it just takes that time. In fact, I'm kind of inclined to think that some things really do take that time, that historicity that, I mean, there's a reason, on jeans, right? I remember Arizona jeans, right, from JCPenney. I remember they started putting the year on their, it was in 1987 is when they started. And I think in 1997, they started finally putting the year of their creation on their jeans, as to where before they never put the year on it, because what are you going to say? You're celebrating 5 years. I mean, who kind of, after a fashion, I mean, in internet speak now, that's 5 years is a long time, but at the time in the 90s, like that's fucking nothing. But once they had 10 years, it's like, okay, yeah, now let's start boasting. We've been around for 10 years. We have some history. I mean, there's a reason they put the dates on that, because it gives you a sense of quality. It gives you a sense of, okay, no, this is here. This is something that's lasted. And so I think with a lot of businesses, sometimes it just takes that time. It just takes those years, and there's nothing you can, I mean, there it is. Like, I think the reason that I do well on Patreon as compared to so many other patrons and podcasts that get on Patreon is because I have a track record of 5 years, which again, in internet speak is a long time. If this was the 90s, that wouldn't have been a long time. But I have a track record of every week there's a new episode. Every week there's new content on Patreon. There's new all the time. And I have the, I have the long episode numbers, it's episode 234, or this is episode 111, I think, of Patreon episodes. Like there's proven the hours have been put in over the years, and people can see that. And so they're like, okay, well, this isn't going to go anywhere. I'll put my money down. And I'll support this. And I'm always honored by that, but it took that time. It does take that time. And I think that's true for not just for podcasting or anything else. I think it's true for in my opinion, it's true for almost any entrepreneurial pursuit. So that's the advice I've got on that. I hope that helps. And I went really long with that question, but let's move on to another one, because I had a bunch more to get into. So, oh boy. Okay. Yeah, let's do this one. Private defense forces. Here's the question. And there was a lot of people were wondering about egoism. There's been some shakeup around the recent translation of The Unique and Its Property and the company Underworld Amusements that published it. Some people are kind of freaking out about all this. I don't know if I'm going to get to that question today because I spent so long on the entrepreneurial one, but I think that was important to do. If I don't, I'll do like a separate episode maybe about it. So let's see. Brian Sovereign, I think I remember you saying on a Sovereign Tech episode a while back that you think that we can't live in a true anarchist society if we replace public police forces with private defense forces. Do you still hold those notions today? If so, why? You don't think that the difference in the set of incentives a private defense force has to deal with versus the different set of incentives that a state-funded defense force have to deal with won't matter? Would you also include private defense forces that don't involve any human involvement, like a home defense security system too? Okay, so once again, a bunch of questions in one here. So let's see. So you think that we can't live in a true anarchist society if we replace public police forces with private defense forces. Do you still hold those notions today? If so, why? Yes, I do. I still think that private defense forces are antithetical to freedom and are a genuine problem. Like because a lot of people talk about this, right? And I'll get to the other questions, the other parts of this as well. A lot of people talk about how, like, okay, well, if we just privatize police, and if we just privatize prisons, which police and prisons are part and parcel, okay, I mean, like the notion of police is arrest and all this, then it's fine. And the incentives, are for them are to make money, and their incentives are very different at the time. After a fashion, the notion of like privatized police and privatized prisons is, if the goal is in a marketplace to like make money and offer the best services, that's fucking terrifying. Because wouldn't that suggest that they do well and catch a lot of criminals? Like there's almost the incentive, I think, with like privatized police forces, really for there to be more criminals, right? Because otherwise, I mean, this is something, in fact, there was the episode that we did, Little Red Picnic Table. And recently, it's episode 232, I think, or maybe it's 231, where we talked about how, like, with insurance companies, like, it's just car insurance companies. Car insurance companies, if they, we talked about how they were developing technologies or systems that by themselves, completely privately, no regulation, no legislation, no laws, made the entire highway system, driving, cars as we know it, safer. Okay. However, the person that was on at the time talking about that, Dan Kroll, he even said, he's like, well, they can't make it too safe because then they go out of business. So you see, this is one of the minor cruxes with the market system, I think, is that to some degree, depending upon what kind of service or business we're talking about, they really can't bring things to full efficiency, which supposedly that's what the market's supposed to do, right? They can't really bring it to full efficiency because they will literally market themselves out of business. And I think that kind of includes private defense forces. That, like what if there's a world where, a lot of criminality doesn't exist anymore? I mean, like one could argue the drug war, exists because it keeps funding, the arms, the violent arms of the state. Well, every arm of the state is violent inherently, but you get my point. The armed arms of the state. So I don't know, like, what great incentives there would be, if it looks like a police force or if it looks like a military. Like, it's just, that's very fucking odd. And the incentives for it just to be money. I mean, you end up with mercenaries, and even soldiers today. Your average government soldier, which I used to be one, will tell you, no, mercenaries are a terrible fucking idea. You don't want that. There's a reason that, honestly, that even went the way of the dodo, because the incentives are so fucking skewed, and it's weird too, because I know a lot of ANCAPs are like, oh yeah, we should do letters of marque where, we have, when we have problems, we hire out to that's what a letter of marque is. And it's a constitutional in the United States concept. We hire out private defense forces or private offense forces or whatever, private armies, to handle a situation and blah, 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 blah. I'll tell you, just before I became an anarchist, the argument that actually made me an anarchist was, and I've talked about this before, it was on Stossel on Fox Business, and PJ O'Rourke, who's used to be a very popular libertarian writer, and Judge Andrew Napolitano were having a debate. And the question came up is that in a stateless society or in a libertarian society, whatever, how do you defend? What do you do about a navy? And PJ O'Rourke gave this long-winded answer. And then Judge Andrew Napolitano just, boom, out of nowhere said, who says you need a navy? And it just clicked with me so hard. I was an anarchist right there. Because you just never hear anybody say this sort of shit, where it's just like, yeah, right. Who the fuck says you need a navy? And it's funny because the Navy is like the one military arm that was actually constitutionally funded, as to where, other militaries or other, branches of the military weren't officially part of the Constitution or legislation until, just at the turn of the 20th century, until much, much later, I forget what year it was in the 1800s, but it wasn't until the late 1800s, and I forget what the name of the act was that allowed for a standing army. But the standing army was, I think legally it couldn't stand for more than 2 years or something like that. Like it wasn't allowed for constitutionally. And then, but there had to be, what ends up being an amendment. Not an amendment, but more or less just an act that changed things that allowed for it. Otherwise, the only thing that was fundable was a navy. Anyway, so in an anarchist society, I think it is antithetical because, I just don't know where an armed gang of some kind doesn't become a government. Like, I think they're really part and parcel. You can say that there's competing armed gangs, but then, I don't know how that doesn't turn into a Hatfield and McCoy situation. We've in the United States, there's historical examples of what happens when, say, a town or something like that relies upon competing private defense forces, or what could be defined that way, and usually it ends up being a civil war between those fucking private defense forces. I think the real anarchist mindset is, and this is, you might think this is a cop out, but okay, but really, the real anarchist, a genuine anarchist mindset, that empathetic, peaceful mindset, will, their version of what a defense force will look so drastically different from any kind of police force, any kind of military, I mean, I'm not saying there wouldn't be some kind of like defensive organization maybe, but I think it would be something like probably where they wouldn't even carry guns. Because once those come into the equation, in many ways, I think you become a government after a fashion. I think it would end up looking very, very different. And certainly the justice system, like restorative justice is the way to go. And that is a huge conversation to get into. But if you please look into restorative justice and just understand like why the prison systems, completely fail. And I'm not saying the question asker was, pining for a prison system of any kind. But a real private defense force, again, will look nothing like what exists anywhere in the world. A real anarchist private defense force, in my opinion. So let's see. Do I think? Yeah. And the second part of the question: do you think the difference in the set of incentives a private defense force has to deal with versus the different set of incentives that a state-funded defense force won't matter? Yeah, I don't think they matter because what would be the difference? Why do police do what they do? For a paycheck. Let's be clear on that. Why do military people do what they do? Yeah, I mean, there's patriotism, but at the end, and they tell themselves, shit about protecting their families or something like that. But if there wasn't a paycheck involved, they wouldn't do it. And there's still a paycheck involved when it comes to, private ones. So, yeah, I don't really see that huge difference. Again, the makeup of what a real anarchist defense force would look like, it would just be so drastically different from what we have today that, in my opinion, it's meaningless to talk about privatized police, to talk about privatized armies, and to talk about privatized prisons or anything like that, because the entire notion of restorative justice would dramatically change how all of that works. I know in Detroit, what is it? There's the threat, some kind of threat response team or something like that. I forget. The guy was I'm intrigued by the way they handle things. Like their job is de-escalation. Okay. So they're not a defense force. They go in there with the notion of like, let's just de-escalate the situation, get it peaceful, and then we can, figure out and move on from there. That's getting a hint at what I think an anarchist defense force, quote unquote, would end up looking like. So anyway, let me go on here. Would you also include private defense forces that don't involve any human element, like a home defense security system too? No, I mean, okay. So here's another kind of two-pronged answer, and I'm probably already at an hour, which I am. And I had other stuff I wanted to get into. So I don't think that there's a problem with home security, cameras around your house, a lot of this different stuff. I mean, these are all totally legitimate things that have been around for a very long time and have been very, very helpful. Including, I mean, this is something talked about all the time, that statistically, just putting a light, installing like a street lamp or something, or some kind of light in the front of your house or whatever, putting those things just in an area that you think is crime ridden or something will drop the crime rate by thousands of %. I mean, just a light, you don't need guns. You don't even need a camera. You don't need any of that shit. In fact, I kind of argue that at least like citywide camera systems, kind of like London, really don't help out with anything. But, just putting a light, I mean, we know we have the time, we've had the 20th century to see what actually works and to get some kind of genuine, metrics and statistics on what's helpful. And 9 times out of 10, it has nothing to do with something that is either surveillance or lethal force. We have all of this data. We know this now. And yet we're still crying for, give me my guns, give me my surveillance society, give me that. And it's like, holy shit. Don't you people look at what's ever actually worked in some of the worst parts of the world? Man. It's like, well, there's going to be gangs and it's going to be warlords going after each other if we don't have security systems of private defense forces and all this stuff. No, look, we have that data too. All right. Africa, right? Or even South America, where you look at all these, varying areas where there's whole warlords and all that shit. Guess what? All you have to do, bring electricity and honestly, mobile phones. And not even smartphones, just mobile phones, mobile communications, bring the ability to communicate quickly and bring power, as an electricity and all this stuff to an area. Guess what? Suddenly those warlords have no more power, or, no more fear-mongering control over the populace. And they lose so much of their, just because the basic ability to communicate from anywhere that people end up having to be. Like Entire massive, warlord style gangs have gone the way of the dodo in Africa just because of the introduction of mobile communications and electricity. We've got the statistics. We have all the information in the world that this shit is just not necessary. You just do business over bullets and everything will be, and things work out. Put a street lamp, for fuck's sake, if it's a bad area. And I mean, it's just amazing. Things will instantly change. It really happens. We know. This isn't speculation. This isn't anecdotal. So, I do worry, like there's the company Night something. I keep forgetting the name of it. We talked about in Sovereign Tech years ago, where they are making, they look like Daleks from Doctor Who walking, rolling around in malls, where they make like these robotic security systems. I think that's kind of a terrifying notion. I know it's kind of a cheat, but really, like when people actually get maybe more of that egoist anarchist kind of mindset, this idea of going to all these crazy lengths to protect property and to keep people in your relationships perhaps honest or from cheating on you. They broke the marriage contract. Oh no. I mean, all that stuff like just falls away like the spooks that they are. So I guess I want to end, this whole question with my point that this is why I don't think you're ever going to have an anarchist planet Earth, because most people just aren't. I mean, most people that call themselves anarchists don't even get to the what I consider the ultimate ends of empathy and of an understanding of the individual and all that. To where a lot of the stuff I don't think would even be a problem. So I think a true anarchist society, as using the words of the question asker, a true anarchist society will never be more than a few people in little pockets, all around the world. And in those pockets, I think often enough they'll be small enough to where, to some degree, not like a self-social enforcement or anything, but just like people will be close enough that, a lot of the stuff won't really be an issue. I think that's the only way you're going to get to that genuine anarchist society. Because again, I think once you create any kind of enforcement body, it doesn't matter if there's competing enforcement bodies, you're running into, you're going to create, I mean, there's the incentive to do things a certain way and maybe a little bit better than how the government does it. Sure. But I think you're still going to run into sort of this whole heroism mindset where, yeah, we're keeping the public safe and all this crap. And that mindset of keeping society safe is, that's what leads to tyranny every single time, in my opinion. And it's so sad because people don't realize it. They think, oh no, that's heroic. Fuck that. Fuck heroism. Be a villain. Or be the antithesis of heroism. That doesn't necessarily mean villainy, I guess, in the dictionary definition. Okay. Yeah. I mean, these are huge issues that I certainly, I couldn't even answer all of it in 30 minutes, but yeah, I mean, a lot of works from anarcho-capitalists about this sort of stuff, like from Hoppe, about private defense forces and all that different. A lot of that is really just about maintaining the status quo as we have it, the social status quo, the property status quo, the financial status quo, all of which is a bit of a problem. I'm not against property. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm just saying based upon, some modern interpretations and maybe how people acquired a lot of the shit. Like there was that crazy article where this person was arguing, saying feel bad from the Mises Institute, where the person I get what they were saying, that a monarchy can potentially be more free than a democracy. I understand that. But at the end, they're like, feel bad for the Queen, cry for the Queen of England because, they're just taxing her property. They're taking away. It's like, how the fuck did she end up with that fucking property, that royal property of hers that she's making money off of? You think she gave a fair deal on all that? Or do you think she even did a deal and she didn't just take it? Oh, fuck, come on. That's why I say some of our notions of property have some real fucking problems, or even a more of a Walter Block style where, you can own people. My goddamned ass you can. Fuck you. Well, sorry. Okay. I don't want to start another war with somebody because apparently so many anarcho-capitalists, oh man, if you say fuck you to them, they treat that like, oh my God, you threatened me. You did this. Wow. Why? Because I don't agree with what you're saying? Oh. Anyway, man, fragile fucking egos out there, boys. Fragile egos. Yeah. So anyway, I hope that answered that. I really appreciate that question. I love that question. I love having that conversation and talk about it. It's definitely something that needs a lot of minutia that would kind of need to be a back and forth, I think, to really like explore certain aspects of it. But yeah, the main thing I'll just say is look into restorative justice, and you'll see that anything that looks anything like defense forces of today will not be a part of the program if restorative justice is actually implemented, which I think that's the only real form of justice, that is part that is conducive to the human condition, that is helpful to the human condition. So, okay. Yeah, I'm definitely not going to be able to get to the egoism thing. I will make that probably a separate episode and talk about it. I did have another question about, I'll touch on this briefly. Let's get into some geeky shit here for a second. So Spider-Man Homecoming. This is a movie I have not seen. I will not see until it comes out on home video. I don't really care. I'm not a Spider-Man fan. Nothing wrong. If you love the movie, I'm so happy for you because I'm all about people's happiness. There was a point kind of brought up that, so there's a cameo by the punk, the punk on the bus from Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, in Spider-Man Homecoming. And there were articles going around. In fact, one of them I thought this is really, really kind of tasteless, where it shows or really, really bullshit. And in fact, if I believed in the justice system that we have, I would have sued. Where it's Spider-Man, like one of the shots from Spider-Man Homecoming, and there's a Klingon bird of prey in the background. Because and they say it's like, oh, Star Trek and Spider-Man exist in the same universe. That was kind of the headline of the article. And so it gave you the sense that, whoa, like, was there a bird of prey in Homecoming? No, there wasn't. Okay. It was just this punk on the bus, which is a funny scene in Star Trek 4. I think Star Trek 4 is a great movie. I love it. But anyway, so this guy's in it. And so now everybody's kind of like going out there saying, oh yeah, well, this is all, canon. Star Trek and Spider-Man are in the same universe. Star Trek and Marvel are in the same universe, blah, 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 blah. No. First off, again, if I was thinking within the conventional social system that we, or the conventional societal system that we have, you'd have to hear from CBS and Paramount that's okay. And CBS and Paramount don't own Spider-Man. Sony does right now. Well, the movies anyway. And they're kind of lending it. I mean, it's really a crazy legal copyright situation where, Marvel proper, that being owned by Disney, gets to use Spider-Man in their little universe right now. And now there's that whole deal where the Venom movies and the Carnage movies and whatever else that gets made by Sony that are part of like the Spider-Man canon that they own for movies, will still, even though Sony and Marvel are two separate companies, they're going to be attached. Now, the reason they're doing that is obvious. Because the MCU is such a wild success, Sony can make way more money if their movies are attached to the Marvel universe, to the Marvel Cinematic Universe from Disney. Just makes sense. There's going to be money made, a lot more money made than there would be without. So there you go. I mean, because Sony has tried a couple times with their Spider-Man franchises, and I guess they just haven't been pleased, and they've decided decided not to go forward with them at various points. That said, so I get that those two are kind of connected, but what you'd really need is CBS or Paramount would have to, which I think Paramount owns the movie properties as far as Star Trek goes. Even the Star Trek universe is just like Marvel, where it's split. Like the TV properties are all owned by CBS. The movie properties are all owned by Paramount. So you'd have to hear from either Paramount or CBS that Spider-Man is somehow canon. What you actually have is Paramount saying that the DC universe, not Marvel, but the DC universe is part of the Star Trek canon, because you have the comic books that deal within the Kelvin timeline, which is totally under the purview of Paramount. Where there's the crossovers. They've had two crossover series with Green Lantern and Green Lantern and Star Trek. Chris Pine's kind of Star Trek, right? The Kelvin timeline. Also in the DC universe, or in Star Trek now, the planet of Daxam which is a kind of like a cousin planet to Krypton in the DC universe, is officially part of the Star Trek canon. So, no, sorry. like if there's any precedent for, a comic book company being attached to Star Trek, it would actually be DC, not stupid fucking Marvel. That's my opinion about it being stupid, about Marvel being stupid. And boy, are they getting stupid. Real quick, like, it was cool that they were, that they did, where Dr. Doom is one of the Iron Men right now. Like, he's taken on the role of Iron Man. That's kind of cool. It was cool when Doc Ock was inhabiting the body of Peter Parker and he was Spider-Man. In fact, that's one of the only times I've ever really seriously read Spider-Man, was when it was, it wasn't the Spectacular, it was the Superior Spider-Man, maybe it was called, or something like that. It was awesome when Doc Ock was in the body of Peter Parker and was playing up being Spider-Man. Of course, that didn't last long. Now they have like Loki taking over the role for Doctor Strange, and it's just like, all right, now it's just a fucking trope. Now you're just going for, like, you've seen that this will sell comics. Now you're just taking every villain and putting them into a hero's role just to make the money, and it's not because you thought it'd be cool or a good idea. Like Doc Ock going into Spider-Man, that was kind of unique. But like Dr. Doom taking on the role of Iron Man makes tons of sense, because it's the Armor Wars. Dr. Doom wears a suit of armor. Like it just fits. Like, it's a good idea. Loki taking the role of Doctor Strange, what the fuck is that? You might as well make the Amalgam universe again. Just a stupid fucking idea. But they're just taking their two most popular characters, or kind of their most popular characters from the movies now, and they're just mashing them up. And it's all a stupid money grab. It's not great storytelling. It's not even a great idea. Like, it doesn't. Again, there was a natural progression between Iron Man and Doctor Doom. This not so for Loki and Doctor Strange. Anyway, so yeah, this is where, like, I'm a huge supporter. So to get back about Star Trek and Spider-Man, I love the idea of there being a canon, and I also, I want to be respectful, and I appreciate people being, not liking the use of the word canon because of its attachment to Catholicism, and that can be, triggering or something else. I totally understand that, and I appreciate that. I am using it. It's the term du jour. But I just want to, I just want you to know I appreciate that feeling. I like the idea of canon. I like the idea that, because what it allows for is for you and I to have a conversation over, like, figuring out maybe what's going to happen in, say, the next issue of a comic, the next movie, the next episode of a TV show, because we have a shared fictional reality of which we can play off of and that we can agree upon. So, that's one of the great joys of being a nerd, of being a sci-fi geek and all this different stuff, right? Is having that canon. That's why I think canon is, in my opinion, is so important. But there is a point where canon can get a little fucking ridiculous, where that, where, I'm trying to think of a religious term for this, but it's escaping me at the moment, but that's fine. Or your zealotry, there we go, where you kind of your canonicity zealotry goes too far, and then you're like, oh yeah, you see, but this is canon with Star Trek now, and it's like, okay, stop, put the fucking brakes on, all right. like there's no need for Spider-Man to be a part of that. There have been great moments where Marvel and Star Trek have connected. In fact, like the Star Trek X-Men crossovers from the 90s were phenomenal. And it was funny too. Like, there are great jokes that made sense. Like where they would say Dr. McCoy and Beast, Hank McCoy, and Bones, Leonard McCoy of the Enterprise, they'd both kind of turn around. Yes. like that kind of worked, right? That was kind of cool. And interestingly, that's something that could happen because Paramount owns the X-Men universe and they own the Star Trek movie universe. So like that's something that would be far more likely. Like, just the Spider-Man thing just doesn't make sense. And if they're going to put, this guy's just looking for a money grab. If they're going to put the punk on the bus in like every movie and say that somehow all these universes are interconnected and that they're part of the same universe, oh, please give me a break. It's fun. It's nice. I'm glad this guy got another paycheck, and if he ends up getting a lot of work because of his punk on the bus part, awesome. Good for you. I hope you make a lot of money and you have happiness in your life. But let's be careful how far we go with this. You need more. If I were to set some kind of canon rule, you'd really need more than one point of contact, to kind of make that happen. Like with Star Trek and the DC universe, you have Daxam and you have the Green Lantern Corps. You got at least 2 points of contact there where there's some kind of connection. And also with DC and Star Trek, like DC, and I talked about this. I did my comic book top 8s where I talked about Marvel and DC, and people have asked me many times, why do you like DC more than Marvel? And my answer is always the same, is that like the science fiction component, which yes, Marvel does have now, but they didn't pay enough attention to it. Just look at the fact that Guardians of the Galaxy, okay, great. They took a risk and made a movie with Guardians of the Galaxy because they're trying to bring up some minor properties and bring in some new blood. There wasn't a Guardians of the Galaxy comic forever. Just, or Challengers of the Unknown or any of that stuff. Like most of those series, like they were so infrequent. They never treated science fiction seriously, really, until more recently. Like, I mean, you had the Nova Corps and all that stuff, but they were completely copying Green Lantern so Nova would kind of come and go as far as comic books go. The science fiction component is never out of fashion. It is never off the bookshelves in comic stores when it comes to the DC universe. There's always, DC's biggest character, well, depending upon your opinion, one of DC's biggest character, part of their trinity, that being Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman is he's an alien. It's totally a science fiction component. I mean, like it's at the heart of the entire DC universe. And I like that. And that's part of the reason that I think the DC universe and Star Trek actually work together really fucking well, because they're both science fiction. As to where Marvel is not science fiction. Marvel is far more fantasy. They're and far more the fantastical. And I don't think the writers for Marvel are nearly as smart historically, even though now everybody writes for every comic book company. But certainly in the 80s and 90s, the writers, I think, my opinion, were far smarter, far more scientific, far cleverer for DC than they were for Marvel by a long shot. And you can see this because I think this is somewhat provable, because let's take the 90s where both companies were kind of at their hottest, all right, as far as like raw sales, maybe raw dollars coming in, even though now comic books are obviously on a resurgence. But one of their hottest points, DC in the 90s was doing like DC 1 million. They were doing all these things that kind of took place in space or in the future. You had the whole Final Night event. You had Parallax, you had Eclipso, you had Darkness Within, right? You had all these things that were dealing with space and just being out there. Marvel, instead, their hottest stuff was either dealing with the far past, like with Apocalypse, which I know Age of Apocalypse was a bit in the future, but it was all like kind of dystopian, which dystopian futurism, and dystopian kind of fiction, and I've talked about this on Sovereign Tech in the past, is really a cheat, because it's an easy way to do science fiction without having to know anything about science. And DC was not doing that. So that's what I'm saying, is that DC has always had, in my opinion, the much smarter writers that could make things far more believable. And, and has always had that stronger science fiction component. So I'm much more amenable to, and there's it's happening where the DC universe and the Star Trek universe are very much part of the same kind of canon in a way. So anyway, for so many people, this argument that I'm making probably sounds positively ridiculous, and I totally understand and appreciate that too. Okay. But, just dropping in these little people into movies and then saying, oh, this is all part of some great canon or whatever, that's horseshit. I mean, I like to have fun with this too. I've talked about this many times, where I think that the Fast and the Furious, Transporter, Crank, and Triple X movies, and like those, like that, they're actually one giant shared universe, and just the characters at the time frame, like within Fast and the Furious, where these characters disappear for a decade or something, it's actually them with taking on another identity and being a part of these like other movies, right? Like, Crank or something like that. I have fun, creating what they call a headcanon like that, where it's in your own mind and all that stuff. But I know not to, I sure as hell wouldn't argue for it. I sure as hell wouldn't like make a blog post in a major publication saying, "Oh, this is the truth. This is the reality." I sure as hell wouldn't like walk up to, I don't know, like a Kevin Feige type character or type person and say, "Hey, is this actually, are these two universes connected or something like that?" Like they would laugh me away, and rightly so. It's just ridiculous. So anyway, this is where canon goes too far. This is where it gets crazy, and you're trying to look for lost books of the Bible when maybe there's a reason shit got compiled the way it did. Ugh. Anyway. So I did briefly talk about, I really need to wrap this up. I'm probably going on an hour and a half here. I did talk about earlier during my conversation about entrepreneurial pursuits that I'm going to be shaking things up on Patreon a bit. I have some things in mind. And like I said, am I looking to bring somebody on as an assistant for Sovereign Tech, Sex and Science Hour and all that? Yes. And increasing Patreon dollars and, other projects coming out and everything. We got Hypercronius 2 coming out, among other things. Part of that is to allow for that. And then we can take it to the next level and the next level and the next level. But it really is all getting to the point, and it needs to get, again, for all of this to work, for all of this to be sustainable and actually make the money. Like I have to go for all these different avenues. Okay. It's not something that, even if it is just a passion project or something, like it has to, all these different avenues have to go for it to make monetary sense and all that. So anyway, so that's something I'm looking at. And like I said, I do have names in mind of who I would want to hire with that. It would only be one person, or it'd only be a one person hire at this moment. Not that I'm only thinking of one person, just anyway. So yeah, that's something to look forward to the future. Anyway, I know I got new patrons this week. Thank you so much for your patronage. Such an honor. And for those that have been around for a while, some of you have been a patron for years now, I guess. Thank you. I mean, means the world to me. You are making all of this able to grow. You are getting this all out there, and you're affording me the ability to, in time to do all of this. And I really appreciate it. I said this on the relationship Q&A episode that was also released yesterday, but please do send me feedback on anything. If it's the short fiction in the newsletters, if it's about the newsletter, in general, if it's about the Q&As, if it's about the show itself, if it's about the intros, if it's about the story, whatever, your feedback is positively priceless to me. It's as worth as much to me as any donation. So, please do send that. I love to know what people are thinking, positive or negative. You don't have to be mean. A lot of people are, and that's okay. I have a very thick skin, but however you want to say it, like it really helps, to hear that sort of thing, to get feedback from listeners. And many of you have been giving it, and it's helpful, and also it's vindicating, and it's really great. So anyway, new Sex and Science Hour will be out this week. Might be some other Patreon episodes. And of course, we've got a dynamite Sovereign Tech lined up for you. I will see you on the other side.